The massive Dravaki scout vessel emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, its chitinous hull absorbing, rather than reflecting light against the backdrop of stars. On the command deck, High Commander Zextrol studied the holographic representation of the third planet with growing curiosity. Another life-bearing world, he noted, mandibles clicking softly. But this one shows artificial structures visible from orbit. His science officer, Krelvex, manipulated the controls to enhance the image. Preliminary scans indicate a dominant species spread across all continents and even beneath the oceans. They appear to be bipedal mammals with no natural armor or weaponry. Zextrol leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the blue-green planet. Yet they dominate their world. Curious. The Dravaki had conquered 17 systems over 3 centuries, incorporating worthy species into their empire and eliminating those deemed irrelevant. As apex predators evolved from ambush hunters, they respected strength and cunning above all else. Establish observation satellites. I want detailed analysis of their capabilities before we make contact, Zextrol ordered. At the United Earth Defense Headquarters beneath Geneva, alarms blared as tracking systems detected the unknown vessel entering the solar system. Object has taken position beyond Mars orbit. Lieutenant Santos reported, fingers flying across her console. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Definitely not human technology. Admiral Wei Cheng maintained his composure despite the gravity of the situation. Contact all major governments. Initiate first contact protocols. And get Dr. Chen up here immediately. Dr. Eliza Chen arrived 15 minutes later, still fastening her lab coat. The xenanthropologist had spent decades theorizing about extraterrestrial civilizations, and now theory was becoming reality. What do we know? She asked, studying the grainy images on the main screen. Not enough, Admiral Wei replied grimly. But they're watching us. Multiple small objects deployed around Earth's orbit. Observation platforms, we think. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. They're studying us before making contact. That suggests caution, maybe even respect. Oh, they're assessing our defenses. General Okafor countered for across the table. We should ready the orbital defense platforms. And send what message? Dr. Chen challenged. That we're hostile and afraid. First impressions matter, especially when dealing with a technologically superior species. For 3 tense days, humanity waited and watched. Then the transmission came, a simple mathematical sequence followed by a request for face-to-face dialogue. The landing site in neutral Switzerland swarmed with scientists, diplomats, and discreetly positioned special forces when the Dravaki shuttle descended from the clouds. Its organic-looking design suggested a creature rather than a vessel, setting the tone for what emerged. The Dravaki delegation towered over their human counterparts, standing nearly 9 feet tall with exoskeletons that gleamed iridescent blue-black under Earth's sun. Their forearms ended in claws that could clearly rend metal, while secondary limbs near their thorax manipulated delicate communication devices. "We are the Dravaki," the leader announced through a translator device. "We bring greetings from the Galactic Imperium." United Nations Secretary-General Adeyemi stepped forward with remarkable composure. "On behalf of humanity, we welcome you to Earth." The Dravaki commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Your world is interesting. Unusual to find mammals as the dominant species. Usually, your kind serves as prey." Dr. Chen whispered translations of the subtle body language to the human delegation. "They're sizing us up, literally. In their eyes, we appear physically inferior." The Dravaki continued their assessment, examining the human representatives with compound eyes that missed nothing. Finally, their leader spoke again. The Dravaki Imperium offers protection to deserving species. Your technology shows promise, though primitive. We offer integration into our empire as a protected client race. You will provide resources and serve the greater collective. In exchange, you receive our protection and guidance. Secretary General Adayami maintained his diplomatic smile. And if we prefer independence? The Dravaki's posture shifted subtly, exoskeleton plates expanding to increase his already imposing silhouette. Independence is for equals, he stated flatly. Your species requires guidance. Refusing our generous offer would necessitate correction, for your own benefit, of course. The human delegation exchanged glances. We will need time to consult with our global leadership, Adayami replied carefully. The Dravaki commander's mandibles clicked again. Of course, we grant you 3 of your Earth days to consider our generous proposal. Choose wisely. As the aliens returned to their shuttle, General Okafor moved beside Dr. Chen. That was a threat, wasn't it? Dr. Chen nodded grimly. Not just a threat. An ultimatum from a species that's never heard the word no. Then they've never met humans before, the general replied. The United Earth Council chamber buzzed with tense voices as representatives from every nation debated humanity's response to the Dravaki ultimatum. Screens around the room displayed military readiness reports alongside Dr. Chen's preliminary analysis of Dravaki biology and technology. Their energy weapons alone could devastate our cities before our missiles reached their ships. Defense Minister Ivanov stated grimly, "We must consider a diplomatic solution." "You mean surrender?" General Okafor countered, her voice sharp. "Becoming vassals to alien overlords who see us as barely more than animals." Dr. Chen stood quietly, her attention fixed on the cultural transmission data streaming across her tablet. Something in the Dravaki communications had caught her attention, repeated references to proving worth and challenge rights. "I may have found something," she interrupted, stepping to the central podium. "The Dravaki social hierarchy isn't just about strength, it's about proving it through formalized challenges. Their entire civilization operates on ritual combat and tests of superiority." Secretary General Adayami leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we challenge them? Their physical capabilities far exceed our own." Dr. Chen's eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. "Not just physical combat. We challenge them to a series of trials. Different categories where humanity might hold advantages. Their cultural codes would make it difficult for them to refuse without losing face." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. "A competition instead of a war," someone murmured. "Exactly," Dr. Chen replied. "And if we win, we negotiate terms for our independence." High Commander Zex Trowell could not believe the transmission for Earth's leaders. His mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation as he paced the command deck. They dared to challenge the Dravaki, these soft-skinned creatures with their fragile bodies and primitive technology. He turned to his advisors. They offer a 5-trial contest, determine Earth's status. Sub-Commander Vexelar's compound eyes reflected the scrolling text of the human proposal. It is unprecedented, yet intriguing. Their suggested trials include physical combat, but also tests of survival, innovation, tactical simulation, and navigation. They seek to avoid their inevitable defeat through trickery, Zextrel hissed. Perhaps, Vexelar admitted, but to refuse a formal challenge would violate our most sacred traditions. The Imperium would question your authority. Zextrol knew this was true. In 17 conquered systems, no species had ever invoked the ancient challenge rights that governed Dravaki society. These humans were either incredibly foolish or dangerously clever. Accept their challenge, he finally decided. Select our 5 champions. The finest warriors of the Dravaki will demonstrate our superiority in all domains, and I will personally oversee their humiliation. The announcement of the challenge agreement sent shockwaves through human society. Within hours, millions watched the globally broadcast call for champions to represent Earth. In a quiet apartment in Cairo, retired Marine Sarah Hassan watched the broadcast, her hand unconsciously touching the prosthetic leg that had replaced the one she'd lost in Nigeria. When the call for a combat specialist came, she stood without hesitation. In Seoul, Olympic decathlete Kwon Jin paused his training, considering the tactical warfare simulation challenge that would require both physical stamina and strategic thinking. On a remote mountain in Chile, wilderness survival expert Thomas Vega received the news via satellite phone and immediately began packing his gear. In Mumbai, engineering prodigy Reg Patel was already sketching ideas for the innovation challenge, his mind racing with possibilities. And at NASA's lunar base, pilot Mai Li volunteered for the navigation trial before the announcement even finished. 5 humans, not the strongest, fastest, or most intelligent specimens individually, but each representing humanity's extraordinary specialization and adaptability. "This is madness," General Okafor told Dr. Chen as they watched the champions assemble. "We're betting our planet's future on 5 people against alien warriors bred for conquest." Dr. Chen smiled slightly. "No, we're betting on what makes humans unique in the universe. Not our strength, but our capacity to innovate, adapt, and overcome. The Dravaki are about to learn why challenging humans was their greatest mistake." The Sahara Desert shimmered under the merciless sun as construction drones completed the combat arena. Temporary stands surrounded the circular platform where the first challenge would take place. Global viewership had reached unprecedented levels, with humanity collectively holding its breath. Sarah Hassan studied her opponent from across the arena. General Kisar stood nearly 10 feet tall, his exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial markings that documented his victories. His 4 powerful arms ended in natural weapons that could tear through metal. "The rules are simple," announced the neutral AA mediator, jointly programmed by both species. "No manufactured weapons. Combat continues until submission, incapacitation, or yielding. Lethal force is prohibited." Sarah nodded, her prosthetic leg gleaming in the sunlight. She had insisted on wearing only lightweight training clothes despite offers of protective gear. "Agility over armor," she had told her team. Kesar's mandibles clicked in what Dr. Chen had identified as Dravaki laughter. "Your champion appears damaged already," he addressed the human delegation. "Perhaps you wish to substitute another before this begins." Sarah stepped forward. "Let's get started." When the signal came, Kisar charged with surprising speed, clearly intending to end the match in seconds. Sarah moved at the last possible moment, her years of combat training in multiple martial arts allowing her to redirect rather than oppose the Dravaki's momentum. "She's conserving energy," Dr. Chen commented as the 2 contestants circled. "Smart move in this heat." Kesar attacked again and again, each time meeting empty air or glancing blows that did nothing to slow his assault. The Dravaki delegation watched with growing satisfaction as Sarah remained defensive, apparently unable to mount any effective offense against her physically superior opponent. 20 minutes into the match, subtle changes became apparent to trained observers. Sar's movements slowed fractionally, His breathing became more pronounced. Earth's gravity, 15% stronger than his homeworld, combined with the desert heat, was taking its toll. Sarah, meanwhile, had carefully analysed her opponent's movement patterns. When Quasar lunged once more, she finally counter-attacked, targeting the joint connecting his upper right arm to his thorax. Exactly where her analysis had shown exoskeleton plates overlapped imperfectly. The precision strike caused Quasar to stagger for the first time. Surprise registered in his compound eyes, quickly replaced by fury. He redoubled his efforts, but Sarah continued her strategy of targeted strikes at structural vulnerabilities while avoiding direct confrontation. By the 40-minute mark, Quasar's movements had become laboured. 3 of his limbs now moved sluggishly from accumulated damage to joint connections. When Sarah executed a perfectly timed sweep targeting his overtaxed legs, the massive Dravaki crashed to the arena floor. Before he could recover, Sarah applied pressure to a nerve cluster at the base of his neck, a weakness identified in Dr. Chen's cynobiology briefing. Quasar's limbs spasmed once, then went limp. Submission achieved, declared the AI mediator. Victory to Earth's champion. The human audience erupted in celebration, while the Dravaki delegation stared in stunned silence. High Commander Zextrol's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. Impossible, he hissed to his advisors. How did this damaged female defeat our finest warrior? The second challenge began 3 hours later. The tactical warfare simulation took place in a holographic chamber where Quan Jin faced Commander Vexlar in a complex battlefield scenario. The simulation rules were straightforward. Capture and hold 3 strategic positions with limited virtual troops and resources. Victory required either controlling all 3 positions simultaneously or eliminating the opponent's command structure. Vexlar deployed his forces in textbook Dravaki formation. Overwhelming force concentrated at central points with flanking units for support. His strategy relied on superior numbers and firepower to dominate the battlefield. Quan, however, scattered his forces in seemingly random patterns, establishing no clear front line and leaving critical positions apparently undefended. "What is this chaos?" Vexlar demanded. "Does your champion not understand basic military doctrine?" Dr. Chen smiled. "We understand it. We just don't always follow it." As the simulation progressed, Vexlar's forces found themselves ambushed from unexpected directions, supply lines disrupted by small strike teams, and communication networks compromised. Quan's unconventional guerrilla tactics, drawn from humanity's long history of asymmetric warfare, confounded the rigid Dravaki command structure. By the simulation's midpoint, Vexlar had committed his reserves to secure the central position, leaving his command post vulnerable to the infiltration team Quan had positioned hours earlier. The simulation ended with Quan's small strike force capturing Vexlar's command center, while his main forces remained engaged elsewhere. "Victory to Earth's champion," the AI announced. "Humanity leads 2 challenges to 0. High Commander Zextrol stared at the holographic replay, his earlier confidence shattered. "How?" he whispered. "How are they defeating us?" Dr. Chen caught his gaze across the chamber and answered simply, "You're fighting how you think battles should be won. We're fighting to win regardless of how." The third challenge took place on Kepler 7 Bits, a barren moon orbiting a gas giant in a nearby star system. Both contestants were transported via Dravaki shuttle, each provided with identical basic survival kits. A knife, water purifier, fire starter, basic shelter materials, and atmospheric filters. Thomas Vega stepped onto the desolate landscape, immediately assessing his surroundings. The moon's atmosphere was technically breathable, but laden with sulfur compounds that made each breath uncomfortable. Temperature fluctuations would range from scorching days to freezing nights. Gravity was slightly lower than Earth's, giving him one small advantage. Across the designated zone, his opponent Krovex emerged from the shuttle. The Dravaki survivalist's natural exoskeleton provided built-in protection against the harsh conditions, while specialized breathing membranes filtered toxins automatically. 30 Earth days, the Dravaki observer announced. Survival with highest functionality determines victory. Commence challenge. The two contestants went their separate ways, each seeking to establish a base camp. Humanity watched through camera drones as Thomas began methodically cataloging available resources, rather than immediately constructing shelter as Krovex did. "He's wasting precious time," General Okafor commented in the observation room. Dr. Chen shook her head. "No, he's thinking long-term. This isn't about who builds the first shelter. It's about who's thriving on day 30. By the end of the first day, Krovex had established an impressive shelter using his superior strength to move large rocks for a windbreak. Thomas had only managed to collect samples of local minerals and indigenous bacterial colonies growing in sheltered rock crevices. On day 3, the difference in approaches became clear. Krovex hunted local arthropoid creatures for food, using his natural speed and strength. Thomas instead cultivated the bacterial colonies he'd collected, creating a renewable food source that required minimal maintenance. When acidic rain began falling on day 7, Krovex's shelter provided immediate protection, but the caustic liquid damaged his collection of hunted food. Thomas's smaller shelter incorporated a filtration system that collected the rainwater and neutralized its acidity using the mineral samples he'd gathered on day 1. "Remarkable adaptation," commented one of the Dravaki scientists observing the competition. "The human compensates for physical limitations with environmental manipulation." By day 15, the true test came when a severe electromagnetic storm swept across the moon. Krovex's rigid stone shelter, while impressive, couldn't withstand the violently shifting ground. The structure partially collapsed, damaging his supplies and equipment. Thomas's flexible shelter, constructed from indigenous fibers he discovered and reinforced with a biological adhesive derived from the bacterial cultures, swayed with the tremors but remained intact. When Krovex struggled to rebuild in the storm's aftermath, Thomas approached his competitor's camp. "You need shelter," Thomas stated simply, gesturing to his own intact dwelling. "I have space." The Dravaki survivalist's mandibles clicked in what might have been embarrassment or anger. After a long moment, he gathered his remaining supplies and followed Thomas. Inside the human's shelter, Krovex observed the ingenious systems Thomas had established: water collection that used day-night temperature differentials, bacterial protein cultivation, even a rudimentary communication device fashioned from salvaged components. "Why assist your competitor?" Krovex finally asked. Thomas shrugged. "Survival isn't just about enduring alone. Sometimes cooperation creates better outcomes for everyone." When the observation committee evaluated both contestants on day 30, the verdict was unanimous. While Krovex had begun with significant biological advantages, Thomas had not only survived but thrived, creating sustainable systems that improved over time rather than merely enduring the harsh conditions. "Victory to Earth's champion," came the announcement. Humanity leaves 3 challenges to 0. In the Earth Observation Center, Secretary General Adeyemi turned to Dr. Chen with cautious optimism. "One more victory, and we secure our independence." Dr. Chen nodded, but her expression remained concerned. The Dravaki have never faced defeat like this. I'm intercepting communications from their fleet. High Commander Zextrel is under pressure from their homeworld. We should prepare for the possibility they won't honor their agreement if they lose. Already done, General Okafor replied quietly. Operation Thunderbolt has been in preparation since first contact. If they choose treachery over honor, Earth will be ready. Rage Patel stood before the gleaming quantum laboratory constructed specially for the fourth challenge. Around him, Earth's greatest scientific minds had gathered as his support team. Physicists, engineers, biologists, and even philosophers. Across the chamber, the Dravaki scientific delegation arranged their advanced computational systems with mechanical precision. The innovation challenge begins, announced the AA mediator. Both teams must develop a functional faster-than-light communication system capable of instantaneous data transfer across at least one astronomical unit. Current theoretical limitations have prevented both civilizations from achieving this breakthrough. You have 48 hours. High Commander Zex Troll watched from the observation deck, mandibles clicking in anticipation. This challenge, at least, should favor the Dravaki. Their scientific knowledge surpassed Earth's by centuries, their computational systems capable of calculations that would take human supercomputers millennia. Begin the integration of the quantum foam manipulation matrices, instructed lead scientist Malvex to his team. Follow standard Theron 317 protocols. We will solve this through computational brute force if necessary. Meanwhile, Raj gathered his team in a circle, ignoring the equipment-heavy approach of their competitors. We need to think differently, he told them. They'll follow established theoretical frameworks. Let's explore what they consider impossible. What do you propose? Asked Dr. Ramirez, quantum specialist from CERN. Raj smiled. Nature already solved this problem billions of years ago. Quantum entanglement alone doesn't work for information transfer. But what if we look at biological systems that seemingly violate locality? For the next 12 hours, while the Dravaki constructed increasingly complex technological arrays, Reg's team explored the quantum properties of neural networks and biological systems. Dr. Chen observed from the monitoring station, noting with interest how the human team spent more time discussing and sketching than building. By the 30-hour mark, the Dravaki had assembled an impressive network of quantum computers and field generators that hummed with barely contained energy. Their calculations suggested 98% probability of success within the remaining time frame. Reg's team, by contrast, had created something unexpected. A hybrid system integrating synthetic neural matrices with quantum-entangled particles embedded in an organic substrate derived from modified algae. This cannot possibly work, scoffed Malvex when he observed their creation. You've built a biological computer, not an FTL communication system. Let's test it and see, Raj replied calmly. At the 47-hour mark, both teams prepared for their demonstrations. The Dravaki activated their massive array, creating a localized distortion in spacetime designed to fold distance temporarily. Data packets were sent. But when they arrived at the receiver 1 light minute away, the information had degraded beyond recognition. Malvex adjusted frantically. Increase power to the stability matrix. Recalibrate the quantum harmonics. The system surged, struggling to maintain coherence, before collapsing entirely as power fluctuations cascaded through its components. When Rage's turn came, he placed a small container housing the neural quantum hybrid at each testing station, one beside him and one at the distant receiver. Each contained a portion of the same organically grown network, quantum entangled at the subatomic level, but connected through what he called neural resonance. The breakthrough wasn't forcing technology to overcome physics, Reg explained. It was understanding that consciousness itself might be the key to solving locality problems. He typed a simple message and pressed enter. Instantly, with zero measurable delay, the message appeared on the receiver's display. The greatest technology often mimics nature's existing solutions. The verification team confirmed perfect information transfer with zero time delay between transmission and reception. Impossible, whispered Malvex. Your technological base shouldn't allow for this. The theoretical framework doesn't even exist in your scientific literature. That's because we created a new framework, Reg replied. When existing theories fail, humans don't just work harder within those limitations. We change the rules entirely. As the human observation team erupted in celebration, High Commander Zex Trell turned away from the viewing window, his compound eyes reflecting cold calculation rather than disappointment. Prepare the fleet, he subvocalized to his second-in-command through their secure channel. If the final challenge does not go in our favor, implement Battle Plan Omega. These humans are too dangerous to be allowed independence. Unbeknownst to him, Dr. Chen's specialized translation algorithms had intercepted and decoded his transmission. As humanity celebrated its fourth consecutive victory, putting them one win away from securing Earth's freedom, the shadow of imminent betrayal loomed. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter glittered in the sunlight, countless rocks tumbling in their ancient dance. Two identical spacecraft hovered at the starting line, their sleek designs incorporating both human and Dravaki engineering principles. Mei Li completed her pre-flight checks with methodical precision. 15 years as NASA's top test pilot had prepared her for extreme conditions, but nothing quite like this. The course ahead wound through the densest part of the asteroid belt, requiring navigation through constantly shifting obstacles at speeds that left minimal reaction time. Final challenge parameters confirmed, came the AI mediator's voice. Pilots will navigate the marked course through the asteroid field. Fastest completion time determines the victor. Both vessels possess identical capabilities. Safety protocols are in place, but be advised that significant risk remains. Through her viewport, May could see the Dravaki pilot, Fleet Admiral Zorgath, in the adjacent vessel. His reputation preceded him. Over 3 centuries of flight experience, with neural enhancements that connected him directly to his ship's systems. Contestants ready, the mediator announced. Launch in 3, 2, 1, begin. Both ships accelerated simultaneously, thrusters flaring as they entered the asteroid field. Zorgath immediately took the lead, his neural interface allowing him to process navigational data and make course corrections microseconds faster than any human could. In the observation center, Dr. Chen watched the telemetry with concern. Zorgath's neural augmentation gives him a significant advantage in reaction time. May knows that, General Okafor replied. She's not trying to match him move for move. Indeed, May had settled into a pattern strikingly different from her competitors. Where Zorgath followed mathematically optimal paths calculated by his ship's computer, May chose seemingly suboptimal routes that kept her slightly behind but required fewer course corrections. She's flying, intuitively, murmured Secretary General Adayemi. Like a bird through a forest rather than a computer following a program. At the quarter mark, Zorgath held a lead of nearly 20 seconds. His trajectory was flawless, each turn precisely calculated to minimize course deviation while maintaining maximum velocity. May, however, had begun to find her rhythm. Having grown up flying atmospheric aircraft where wind currents and turbulence created constantly changing conditions, she approached the asteroid field not as a navigational problem to be solved, but as an environment to be felt and anticipated. "Look at those G-forces," gasped one of the engineers monitoring their telemetry. "She's using the gravitational pull of the larger asteroids to slingshot around turns." At the halfway point, a massive solar flare erupted from the sun, sending a wave of electromagnetic interference across the course. Warning lights flashed inside both spacecraft as navigation systems flickered and sensor readings became unreliable. Zorgath's advantage vanished instantly. His neural interface, dependent on precise data processing, began feeding him conflicting information. His pace slowed dramatically as he was forced to rely on visual navigation alone, something his species, evolved on a world with perpetual atmospheric haze, had little evolutionary preparation for. May, by contrast, smiled grimly. "Just like flying through a thunderstorm," she muttered, relying on her finely honed human senses, peripheral vision detecting movement, inner ear calibrating orientation, and the subtle vibrations through her control stick providing tactile feedback. She accelerated, trusting her instincts where instruments failed. One particularly daring maneuver took her through a narrow gap between colliding asteroids, a passage that appeared to close entirely moments after she cleared it. "Impossible," Zextrel exclaimed from the observation deck. How did she predict that collision path without computational assistance? Dr. Chen simply smiled. "Human intuition, something your species has apparently never needed to develop." As they approached the final stretch, May had not only closed the gap, but taken a substantial lead. Zorgath pushed his engines beyond safety parameters in a desperate attempt to recover, but the course's final section, a dense cluster of rapidly rotating asteroids, proved insurmountable without the precision instruments the solar flare had compromised. May crossed the finish line 1 minute and 47 seconds before her opponent, sealing humanity's 5th consecutive victory and Earth's freedom. In the momentary silence that followed the announcement, May exhaled slowly before opening a communication channel to her defeated opponent. "Admiral Zorgath," she transmitted, "that was some of the finest flying I've ever witnessed. It was an honor to compete against you." There was a long pause before the Dravaki pilot responded, his voice carrying a complexity of emotions the translation algorithms struggled to interpret. "The honor was mine, human. I have flown for 3 centuries, but today I learned something new about what it means to truly fly." As celebrations erupted across Earth, Dr. Chen's expression remained guarded. She turned to General Okafor, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. "Initiate Operation Thunderbolt," the general said quietly into her secure comm. "The Dravaki fleet is moving into attack formation. It seems they prefer dishonor to defeat." Alarms blared across Earth's defense network as Dravaki warships broke formation, powering weapons systems and deploying fighter squadrons. High Commander Zextrel stood on his command deck, mandibles set in grim determination. "Begin the attack sequence," he ordered. "Primary targets are their military installations and communication arrays. Once their command structure is neutralized, landing forces will secure key population centers." The first wave of Dravaki attack came in the form of electromagnetic pulse weapons designed to disable Earth's technology. Brilliant blue energy spheres descended through the atmosphere, detonating in cascading waves across every continent. In Geneva, Secretary General Adeyemi watched calmly as the lights flickered but remained on. Faraday Shielding Holding reported a technician. All critical systems protected. General Okafor nodded with satisfaction. From the moment Dr. Chen translated their technical databases, we've been preparing countermeasures. Operation Thunderbolt is proceeding exactly as planned. The second wave targeted military bases and defense installations with precision energy weapons. Dravaki gunners reported direct hits on every target, yet encountered minimal resistance and suspiciously empty facilities. Something is wrong, Sub-Commander Vexilor reported uneasily. Scans show these installations were fully operational hours ago. Now they appear abandoned. Zextrel's compound eyes narrowed. Launch ground forces immediately. Secure their command centers before they can regroup. Dravaki landing craft descended on 6 continents, disgorging heavily armed warriors, expecting minimal opposition from the technologically disabled humans. Instead, they encountered prepared positions and weapons specifically designed to penetrate their exoskeletons at joint vulnerabilities. From underwater bases, hidden from orbital scans, human submarines launched missiles that streaked toward Dravaki support vessels. From subterranean bunkers, built beneath seeming civilian structures, defense forces emerged with rail guns capable of punching through Dravaki armor. Most surprisingly, from orbital platforms, camouflaged to appear as space debris, Earth's hidden fleet moved to engage the Dravaki ships from behind. Impossible. Zextrel raged as damage reports flooded in. How did they hide these capabilities from our scans? How did they know we would attack? On his command terminal, a communication request flashed. Against his better judgment, he accepted. Dr. Chen's face appeared on screen. High Commander, you should know that we intercepted your battle plan transmission hours ago. In fact, we've been monitoring your secure channels since our first meeting. Impossible, Zextrel repeated. Our encryption was compromised when your cultural database was shared during the challenge preparations, Dr. Chen explained. The language matrix your translator provided contained subtle backdoors our cybersecurity team identified immediately. You see, humans have a long history of communications warfare. Across Earth's surface, the battle raged, but with outcomes vastly different from what the Dravaki had anticipated. Their landing forces found themselves outmaneuvered not by superior strength or technology, but by humans who had studied their tactics, identified their weaknesses, and prepared specifically to counter their advantages. You should also know, Dr. Chen continued, that during your ship's visit to our orbital station, we introduced certain modifications to your environmental systems. Nothing harmful, just a specially engineered variant of a common Earth bacteria that's been gradually neutralizing your ship's organic control matrices. On cue, primary systems throughout the Dravaki fleet began failing as the bioengineered microorganisms, designed by Rage Patel based on samples collected during the challenges, attacked the semi-organic components of their technology. This was never about proving ourselves to you, Dr. Chen said, her voice level. The challenges weren't to determine if humans would serve the Dravaki. They were to determine if the Dravaki could survive challenging humans. As his ship's systems failed around him, Zextrel realized the full extent of his species' miscalculation. They had categorized humans as physically inferior prey species, never considering that intelligence coupled with extreme adaptability could render traditional advantages meaningless. You knew, he said finally. You knew we would betray the agreement from the beginning. Of course, Dr. Chen replied simply, because we asked ourselves what we would do in your position, and then prepared accordingly. That's the human way. Throughout the solar system, Dravaki forces found themselves in an impossible situation, surrounded, their technology failing, and facing an enemy who had anticipated their every move. What had begun as a simple conquest was ending as a humiliating defeat. The voice of Secretary-General Adeyemi replaced Dr. Chen on the communication channel. High Commander Zextrel, we are prepared to accept your unconditional surrender. Despite your betrayal, we offer terms that include safe passage from our solar system for all surviving Dravaki forces. Zextrel stared at the human leader in disbelief. Even in victory, these strange creatures offered mercy where the Dravaki would have shown none. Why? He asked simply. Because, Adeyemi responded, proving we can destroy you is sufficient. Actually doing so is unnecessary. That distinction is also part of being human. 3 days after the failed invasion began, the remaining Dravaki forces gathered in high orbit around Earth. Their once magnificent fleet, now partially disabled and significantly reduced in number, formed a somber procession as the formal surrender ceremony commenced. High Commander Zextrel stood alone in the United Earth Council chamber, his towering form somehow diminished by recent events. His exoskeleton, normally gleaming with pride, appeared dull under Earth's lighting. Before him, representatives from every human nation watched in sullen silence. The Dravaki Imperium, he began, his translator conveying the ritualized words, acknowledges defeat at the hands of humanity. In accordance with our ancient traditions, I offer myself for execution as recompense for our dishonor. Secretary-General Adeyemi rose slowly. Commander Zextrel, Earth does not seek your life. Instead, we offer terms for lasting peace. The terms were projected on the chamber's main screen. Immediate withdrawal from Earth's solar system, technological exchange as reparations, and formal recognition of humanity's sovereign status. Most significantly, the Dravaki would carry a message back to their empire. Earth desired peaceful coexistence, but would defend itself with all necessary force if threatened again. These terms are unexpected, Zextrel admitted, mandibles clicking softly. In your position, the Dravaki would not show such restraint. Which is precisely why we prevailed, Dr. Chen replied from her seat beside the Secretary-General. Different values lead to different outcomes. After the formal proceedings concluded, Dr. Chen found herself alone with Zextrel in a secure conference room. For several moments, predator and prey regarded each other in silence. I wish to understand, the Dravaki commander finally said. How did a species with such physical limitations become so formidable? Because of those limitations, not despite them, Dr. Chen explained. Our evolutionary path required cooperation, innovation, and adaptability to survive. We couldn't outfight our predators, so we outthought them. We couldn't survive harsh environments with our bodies, so we created technology to modify our surroundings. But your technology is centuries behind ours, Zextrel countered. Technology is merely a tool, Dr. Chen smiled. Our true strength lies in our diversity of thought. No two humans approach a problem exactly the same way. Where your species seeks the optimal solution based on established principles, we generate thousands of potential solutions, many seemingly irrational or impossible. Zextrel's compound eyes studied her with new understanding. We categorized life forms by physical capabilities, never considering that intelligence coupled with extreme adaptability could render traditional advantages meaningless. Precisely, Dr. Chen nodded. You evolved as apex predators with few natural threats. We evolved surrounded by dangers, forcing us to become problem solvers above all else. As the Dravaki fleet departed Earth's orbit the following day, humanity began its transformation from an isolated planetary civilization to a recognized galactic power. The 5 champions who had represented Earth became global icons, each establishing institutes dedicated to their specialties: combat tactics, strategic thinking, survival adaptability, technological innovation, and space exploration. Earth integrated the reparation technologies while preparing diplomatic and defense initiatives for future extraterrestrial contact. The knowledge that they were not alone in the universe had forever changed humanity's perspective, uniting previously divided nations against potential cosmic threats. 6 months later, at a neutral space station in Alpha Centauri, representatives from 27 galactic civilizations gathered for a Security Council meeting. The central topic: the unexpected emergence of humanity onto the interstellar stage. The Dravaki ambassador stood before the assembly, his formal report concluding with unprecedented classification. Based on direct combat experience and rigorous analysis, we hereby designate Sol 3, called Earth, as a Class 10 death world and humans as an apex predator species. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the gathering. A representative from a gas giant civilization raised their sensory appendage. By what criteria? Their planet's gravity and atmospheric composition are mild by galactic standards. Humans possess no natural weapons, toxins, or specialized predatory adaptations. Their adaptation is adaptation itself, the Dravaki explained. They transform weaknesses into strengths. They modify their environment rather than evolving to suit it. They cooperate at scales most species reserve for genetic relatives. Surely you exaggerate, suggested another delegate. Their technology remains primitive by our standards. The Dravaki ambassador activated a holographic display showing footage from the failed invasion. We held every conceivable advantage, technological, physical, numerical. Yet they anticipated our every move because they asked themselves, what would we do if we were our enemy? He paused, compound eyes scanning the assembly. The greatest danger of humans is not their weapons or their strength. It is that they don't know they're supposed to lose. And by the time you realize that matters, it's already too late.